You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday the 13th of November 2013. The slave trade is alive and kicking in Britain as thousands are held captive. Britain is a paradise for poor migrants, say angry French. Romanian mayor says half the population of villagers are on their way to Britain for higher salaries and generous benefits. British cities could be hit by rioting because of an influx of Roma migrants, David Plunkett has warned. Sharia in Germany, 100 camels are the price of a dead person in Berlin. Italy, Ghanaian pickaxe murderer to get fast-track trial. Le Pen and Wilders to meet to form EU alliance. Al-Qaeda teaches on Twitter how to kindly cut off human head. Polio outbreak in Syria threatens all Middle East. Ronald Reagan, Veterans Day speech 1988. Thought for the day, it's not all bad news, is it? And finally, Plod can't find the criminal, so Nick the reporter. UK news. The slave trade is alive and kicking in Britain as thousands are held captive. Home Secretary Theresa May recently called for an end to modern-day slavery. Last month, the first ever global slavery index revealed there are 29.8 million people living as slaves in 162 countries. Britain is not immune to the problem, and even though it is ranked 160th on the list, there are still more than 4,000 slaves here, an estimate that the index judges to be conservative. The Serious Organised Crime Agency, SOCA, identified more than 2,000 potential victims of human trafficking in Britain last year. Erskine added, slavery exists because there's a demand for a cheap something, whether that's labour, drugs, childcare or simply accepting the idea women can be bought and anything done to them. So ask yourself, what's your cheap something? World at 8. One of the points here is that unlike black slavery, when Africans were taken abroad to work in the fields of the Caribbean and the Americas, their owners were white. Now in the UK the slavers are usually their own tribes or ethnic mixes, which makes it doubly difficult to stop or even investigate, especially with the dosage of PC racism involved and human rights. Britain is a paradise for poor migrants, says angry French. A French politician has slammed Britain's grotesque and hypocritical immigration policies for leaving Calais overrun with migrants. Monsieur Miguenet says, we are facing a grotesque British immigration policy, if not hypocritical. Britain says we don't want immigrants, but does nothing to prevent the black economy. 2 million people work in the black economy in Britain. He claimed 400 migrants from Africa and Asia were currently squatting in dilapidated buildings or in tents in Calais city centre, and he warned they will soon number thousands in the region as a whole. World at 8. Well, Monsieur Miguenet, the blame lies with the French. They wanted the Channel and they got it, and with it the UK lost its last remaining barrier to Europe. The French have been sending their immigrants through the Channel since it was built, and we have paid in the UK dearly for it. Close it down is my advice, or have soldiers patrol it from both sides and stop stating the obvious. Romanian mayor says half the population of villagers are on their way to Britain for higher salaries and generous benefits. The mayor of 2 Romanian villages has claimed that up to half their residents will move to the UK when restrictions are lifted in January. In January the only thing left will be the goat, Romanian father of 7's boast, as mayor says half the population of his villages are on their way to Britain for the higher salaries and generous benefits. Cola Gabriel Adrian said he believed 50% of the 1,100 people in poverty-stricken Berini and Ulish could travel to Britain in search of higher salaries and the generous welfare system in the new year. Many have already moved to France, Italy and Spain, but the mayor said the UK would soon become a more attractive destination with better conditions when the borders are relaxed. World at 8 states. We must make conditions in the UK bad for all of these people, not better than they've ever had it. Of course they will keep coming until they are stopped, either by the cost of getting here or trying to settle. We need to start shipping them back now. British cities could be hit by rioting because of an influx of Roma migrants, David Plunkett has warned. The former Home Secretary said frictions with local people could lead racial tensions to explode in a repeat of the riots that rocked northern towns in the summer of 2001. Mr Blunkett called on Roma migrants from Slovakia to change their culture because their dumping of rubbish and refusal to send their children to school had caused understandable tensions with residents in his home city of Sheffield. Sheffield citizens have already set up street patrols to combat antisocial behaviour by the Roma. Britain is home to more than 200,000 Roma migrants, most of them from Eastern Europe. European news. Sharia in Germany. 100 camels are the price of a dead person in Berlin. 100 camels are the price of a dead person in Berlin. No, cut that one out. In German Muslim-dominated immigrant neighbourhoods, a parallel judicial system has developed in the tradition of Sharia. The state seems to capitulate in the power of the Arab clans. As Taqiyuddin Yatkin in spring 2013 had a reconciliation meeting with the Lebanese extended family Omarayat, he hoped that both sides in the Arab tradition would join hands and would drink tea. The occasion was an accident over 4 years ago. In January 2009, Yatkin's son Ali had killed the 17-year-old Mohammed Omarayat when he went through the lights at red and fatally injured Omarayat. As the former president of the Central Council of Turks in Germany entered the premises of the Lebanese Association in Berlin-Neukölln, he knew that the victim's family wanted no smoking peace pipe. 40 to 50 relatives of Omarayat, 40 to 50 members met. The message of this threat scenario was clear. Whoever does not cooperate here messes with the entire extended family of Omarayat. The police see parts of the family as organised criminals primarily engaged in property and violent crimes. The director at the meeting was the imam of the Mosque of Omar Nakhon. First, the imam was reciting from the Quran and then determined that the case was to be solved according to Sharia. The son of the Omarayats had been killed and the person responsible for it is not punished. According to the law of our country he's guilty, whether he acted negligently or intentionally, Yatkin protested. I do not accept Sharia, we live in Germany. My son has been acquitted by a court of law. However, the argument did not impress the imam. During the talks on reparations, Yatkin was put under pressure. We do not want to threaten you, but if you're on the street we cannot guarantee your life. As compensation, first 100 camels were required, not in the desert but in the middle of the metropolis of Berlin. Converted into euros, it is a sum of 55,000 euros. After much haggling, in the end they settled on 20,000 euros. World at 8 states. If the German people put up with this in their country, when they wouldn't put up with the well-integrated Jewish communities that had lived there 800 years, why put up with these awful Arabs and their third world idea of living, which actually dates back 800 years? Italy, Ghanaian pickaxe murderer to get fast-track trial. A Milan judge on Monday ruled a Ghanaian immigrant who killed 3 people in a pickaxe rampage in Milan in May will undergo a fast-track trial, which under Italian law means the defendant will only serve 2/3 of his sentence if convicted. In his May the 11th spree, Marder Adam Kabobo, 31, murdered a 64-year-old pensioner walking his dog, an unemployed 40-year-old standing outside a cafe and a 21-year-old helping his father stack newspapers at their kiosk. 2 other people were injured in Kabobo's string of attacks, which lasted an hour before he was stopped by the police. He was judged fit to stand trial in early October, despite telling psychiatrists voices from Africa told him to do it. Psychiatrists told judges that while he suffers from schizophrenic psychosis, Kabobo's ability to control his actions was greatly diminished but not totally absent. He was sufficiently able to understand what he was doing to face murder charges. Kabobo, who has not sought treatment for mental problems, told police, "I never sleep." The Ghanaian, who has a criminal record, came to Italy illegally in 2011 and was later served an expulsion order. World at 8. Well, they said the only things working in Italy during the war were the reverse lights on their tanks, and here they're proving it, and how to stop him. Well, at least they did, which is more than our plods did for poor Lee Rigby. This guy is an open and shut case. Death, it is kinder for him. Le Pen and Wilders meet to form EU alliance. They are opposed to the EU but plan to work together in the campaign for the European election in May 2014. Marine Le Pen and Geert Wilders met today in The Hague to set up their alliance. In one French opinion poll on the European elections, Front National leader Marine Le Pen came top. Wilders is also gathering momentum in the Netherlands with his Party for Freedom. Both of them are typical of a new generation of right-wing politicians who think beyond their own borders and appear more moderate in their predecessors. World at 8. Russia Today did a bit on this last week and said that the merging of all the Western nationalists within the EU could affect the outcome of whether these nations stay in the EU or not. Apparently it could prove a force majeure. World News. Al-Qaeda teaches on Twitter how to kindly cut off human head. An article in Lebanese daily As-Safir has taken a look into Al-Qaeda's increasing use of social media networks and media technology in spreading its ideology and even teaching people how to kill with kindness. World at 8. How considerate of them. Polio outbreak in Syria threatens all Middle East. Several thousand newborns have not been immunised against the polio virus because of the war in Syria, but therefore polio is rampant there. The World Health Organization has already confirmed 10 cases. Neighbouring countries are now fearing the spread of the disease by way of refugees. World at 8 states. I grew up in the days of polio and it was not pleasant. It has already been brought into this country by immigration and we really need to pay attention as a country and a government to the threat of foreign-born epidemics to our own people. Ronald Reagan, Veteran Day Speech 1988. On remembering those who gave their lives for our freedoms, a brief address I couldn't pass up. Ronald Reagan said, "Those who live today remember those who do not. Those who know freedom remember today those who gave up life for freedom. Today, in honour of the dead, we conduct ceremonies. We lay wreaths, we speak words of tribute, and in our memories, in our hearts, we hold them close to us still. Yet we also know, even as their families knew, that when they last looked upon them, that they can never be fully ours again. That they now belong to God and to that for which they so selflessly made a final and eternal act of devotion. We could not forget them. Even if they were not our own, we could not forget them. For all time, they are what we can only aspire to be, giving, unselfish, the epitome of human love, to lay down one's life so that others might live. We think on their lives, we think on their final moments. In our mind's eye we see young Americans in a European forest or on an Asian island or at sea or in aerial combat. And as life expired we know that those who could had last thoughts of us and of their love for us. As they thought of us then, so too we think of them now, with love, with devotion and with faith. The certainty that what they died for was worthy of their sacrifice. Faith too in God and in the nation that has pledged itself to his work and to the dream of human freedom, and a nation too that today and always pledges itself to their eternal memory. Thank you, God bless. Ronald Reagan, 40th President of the United States, 1981 to 1989, delivered at the Veterans Day National Ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery, Arlington, Virginia, November the 11th, 1988. World at 8 states, this speech eclipses many other political speeches. If you listen carefully, it applies to this present day. Thought for the day. Not all bad news. If you want to retain your sanity for any length of time when reading the papers, you have to approach the media in a certain way, with a rather warped sense of humour. You'll find stories really important to this country and its people lost in the politically correct and seem-to-be caring aspect of our papers, whilst unimportant people drone on about subjects which are really cover-ups and misinformation for the masses, or the sheeples as they are called. I like sheep as well, but preferably roast with a good dollop of mint sauce. At least the Daily Mail has put an important one on the front page today. That of Jack Straw admitting that the Labour ethos of allowing limitless migrants from the EU into our country was a rather well-intentioned but spectacular mistake, and how right he is, more of that later. However, trawling through previous copies of the DM, we have in order of importance a front page telling us of patients dying on trolleys. They have been for years. A Muslim jihadist doctor coming home after fighting in Syria. They have the nerve to say he came from East London. Not really, matey, unless he fell in the Black Sea on the way here. His true origins are never printed. Midwives put baby in stationery cupboard. And I might say without fear of being hauled over the racial coals, by the look of them, they shouldn't be let into a country, let alone a hospital. They really frighten the horses. Then of course we have the usual pages on the typhoon in the Philippines. They have my sympathies, but we have problems closer to home, including looking after Filipino immigrants in this country, retraining the nurses so they can go to the US and earn more money. Then we come to the fairly low-key article on the influx of Roma migrants could spark city riots, warns Blunkett. Well, since it was his Labour Party that initiated much of the newer EU migrants, it is rather the pot calling the kettle black, isn't it? Britain is home to more than 200,000 Roma migrants, most of them from Eastern Europe, and more will come when restrictions are lifted in 2014. In fact, Collar Gabriel Adrian said he believed that in just 2 poverty-stricken villages, 50% of both populations of Roma will come over here, and in fact almost laughingly said only a goat would be left. Frankly, like Queen Victoria, I'm not amused at all. Of course the media are likening any unrest in the mostly unpublished at the time riots in the north in 2001 in which Asian, mainly Muslim migrants clashed with the National Front and other far-right groups. They think this was bad. They haven't seen the Romas in action. I have, but that will come in a later article. Suffice to say they are an awful people, and I mean truly awful. I never thought that even I, with my well-known views of humanity, would really dislike the look, sound and smell of a certain group of peoples, but I do, and the Roma fits this bill. One question to ask is, why do they come? Ostensibly, according to fellow Romanians or Eastern Slovakians, they come to work. Why? They don't work in their own countries, so why expect jobs over here? If they ever had even badly paid jobs at home, there'd be no reason whatsoever to travel thousands of miles to a small island in the North Sea, would there? No. They come for benefits. Free healthcare, free housing or camping facilities and free education, which they don't take up as they make their children go on the streets to beg. Eastern Europe has been home to the Romas for hundreds of years. They should know their enemy, and probably do, which is why they've arranged for them to come to the UK. The EU doesn't like us, and it shows. Acts speak louder than words, and this act is an act of crimes against humanity, us being the humanity. Make no mistake, these people are not your friendly, slightly shifty travellers, tinkers or diddycoys. These people for the most part have been living like Aborigines in countries whose own people hate them. They're used to hate, and they come over here hating us. They bite the hands that feed them because that is what they've been doing for generations, living hand to mouth and well below the poverty level. The gene pool is rapidly dwindling, as you can see by the pictures of them, and the sad fact is there is nothing that the Romas bring into any country that can be considered worthy or justified. In short, they are the pariahs of Europe, but the EU clearly consider that they are worthy of what is in short repatriation into neighbouring countries. In a word, they aren't. They should be forcibly stopped from coming in, or if once here, deported without any asylum hearing at all. The reasons being, they are without normal standards of living. They have low moral standards. They breed like pigs but without the usefulness of pigs. They take over entire roads and streets. They live their lives in those streets and gardens with no thought of how the indigenous population live. They peddle drugs, vice and trouble wherever they go. They hate the British and have no wish to integrate at all. They don't work and moreover are unable to speak English at all. The numbers of Romas will increase with childbirth and future immigration to levels which is already unsustainable on our island. They bring down any areas they live or camp in. They do not add to any vicinity in any way. We soft-hearted Brits are already the laughing stock of the world in the way in which our various governments open our homeland to every Tom, Dick or Harry, or rather Mohammed, Obeidi and Hussein. We took in the West Indians because of the post-war lack of working stock, and that caused awful trouble with the East End dockers. We took in the first rush of Kenyan Asians, which started the troubles in the north, which are ongoing. We took in the Hong Kong Chinese, but then the Chinese have been coming in illegally since the year dot. Then we took in the continuing flow of Africans because of old colonial ties, as with the Indians and Pakistanis. Then the EU lot, which seems to comprise of sub-Saharan Africans and Libyans et al. Through France. And now we have the pleasure of the Romas, who should never have left India in the first place. We put up, or appear to, with the vast Muslim enclaves which cover our land, but even the Brits, even they, will not put up with the Romas. Why? because they encompass everything that is bad with Johnny Foreigner. And you have to remember that although we've softened up or been softened up over the years, we are still a tribal peoples, and the time must come when even we have to think of the future and not just the present. And finally, burqa suspect Mohammed Ahmed Mohammed flees, so police nick reporter. Police hunting a runaway terror suspect swooped on a mosque in West London and nabbed a tabloid newspaper reporter. The journalist had been distributing posters in the area around the mosque where Mohammed Ahmed Mohammed dodged the long arm of the law by donning a burqa, offering a reward for the 27-year-old Somali-born Britain's arrest. A mob soon gathered and someone complained to Plod. Uniformed officers arrived and took the reporter and his photographer to Acton police station on suspicion of racially aggravated public disorder. The pair were quizzed under caution by detectives for 4 hours before being released. Police say their investigation is continuing and charges could still follow. It seems to be open season on journos right now. This presenter says no comment. You have been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart and I wish you all a very good night.
You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Monday the 13th of November 2013. The slave trade is alive and kicking in Britain as thousands are held captive. Britain is a paradise for poor migrants, say angry French. Romanian mayor says half the population of villages are on their way to Britain for higher salaries and generous benefits. British cities could be hit by rioting because of an influx of Roma migrants, David Plunkett has warned. Sharia in Germany, 100 camels are the price of a dead person in Berlin. Italy, Ghanaian pickaxe murderer to get fast-track trial. Le Pen and Wilders to meet to form EU alliance. Al-Qaeda teaches on Twitter how to kindly cut off human head. Polio outbreak in Syria, not immune to the problem, and even though it is ranked 160th on the list, there are still more than 4,000 slaves here, an estimate that the index judges to be conservative. The Serious Organised Crime Agency, SOCA, identified more than 2,000 potential victims of human trafficking in Britain last year. Erskine added, slavery exists because there's a demand for a cheap something, whether that's labour, drugs, childcare or simply accepting the idea women can be bought and anything done to them. So ask yourself, what's your cheap something? World at 8. One of the points here is that unlike black slavery, when Africans were taken abroad to work in the fields of the Caribbean and the Americas, their owners were white. Now in the UK the slavers are usually their own tribes or ethnic mixes, which makes it doubly difficult to stop or even investigate, especially with the dosage of PC racism involved and human rights. Britain is a paradise for poor migrants, says angry French. A French politician has slammed Britain's grotesque and hypocritical immigration policies for leaving Calais overrun with migrants. Monsieur Migration threatens all Middle East. Ronald Reagan, Veterans Day speech 1988. Thought for the day, it's not all bad news, is it? And finally, Plod can't find the criminal, so nick the reporter. UK news. The slave trade is alive and kicking in Britain as thousands are held captive. Home Secretary Theresa May recently called for an end to modern-day slavery. Last month, the first ever global slavery index revealed there are 29.8 million people living as slaves in 162 countries. Britain is not